It started like any other night at the dispatch center, until I picked up a call that shouldn't have existed. The woman's voice was shaking, begging for help from an asylum abandoned 50 years ago. I sent officers to check it out, but then I started hearing my own voice on the line. And that's when I realized the call wasn't coming from them. It was coming from me. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the bed. It happened in the winter of 2019, in a quiet Midwestern town called Redding Falls. Nights there were usually calm, the streets covered in frost, the air thick with silence broken only by the hum of distant traffic. Derek Miller, 33, had been working as a 911 dispatcher for almost 7 years. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills and gave him a sense of control, until that night. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the green call indicator on his screen blinked. The number that appeared made no sense. The prefix belonged to a district that hadn't existed for decades. He adjusted his headset and answered in his calm, trained voice. 911, what's your emergency? For a moment, there was only static. Then, a faint, trembling whisper. He's here, in the basement. Please, hurry. Derek froze. The voice was female, young, terrified, but the tone carried something else, something hollow, like it was echoing from a long tunnel. He typed the number into the system for a location trace. The result made his stomach turn cold. St. Helena's Psychiatric Hospital. That place had been abandoned since 1972, after a fire that supposedly killed most of the patients. The property had been sealed off for years. The county removed it from active emergency grids. Yet the call had come through perfectly, complete with GPS coordinates. Derek double-checked. It wasn't a glitch. The signal was live. Following protocol, he dispatched 2 patrol units, Officers Ramirez and Hale. They were both familiar faces, steady and reliable. Derek briefed them over the radio, possible trespassers at St. Helena's. Caller claims someone's in the basement. Copy that, Ramirez replied, his voice casual but alert. As they drove out, Derek pulled up the hospital's archived blueprints on his second monitor. The basement stretched beneath the main structure like a labyrinth. He told himself it was probably kids, or squatters, maybe a prank. Still, something in that voice replayed in his head, the way she said he's here. 22 minutes later, the first transmission came through. Dispatch, we're on site, Hale said. Building looks sealed. Windows boarded, no signs of forced entry. Understood, Derek replied. Proceed with caution. Static. Then, faint breathing through the open mic. Dispatch, we're hearing something. Coming from below us. Below? Derek asked. You mean the basement? Affirmative. There's movement down there. He turned up the gain on his headset. Through the radio hiss, he could swear he heard a woman crying. Ramirez, confirm, do you have visual? No response. Only a short burst of white noise, then silence. Seconds later, Hale's voice came back, sharp and distorted. Dispatch, something's wrong. The stairwell is. The transmission cut mid-sentence. The channel went dead. Derek sat frozen. He tried to re-establish the line, but both radios showed signal lost. He called the patrol car's onboard system, no response. The GPS tracker still showed them stationary near the rear entrance of the asylum. He replayed the initial 911 call, hoping to catch a background clue. But what he heard this time wasn't the same. The static had shifted. Behind the female voice, faintly, there was breathing, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. Then, layered under it, his own recorded voice whispering. Derek, she's not alone. He ripped off his headset, heart pounding. He stared at the caller ID, still active, still connected. The timer on the screen was frozen at 2 minutes and 17 seconds, the exact time the call came in. Outside, wind howled through the empty parking lot. Inside the dispatch room, every monitor reflected Derek's pale face under the flickering fluorescent light. He took a deep breath and reached for the radio again, his voice trembling for the first time that night. "Unit 12, Unit 6, do you copy?" Nothing. Only static. Then, buried deep in the noise, a single whisper that made his skin crawl. "Too late." The line went dead completely. The following night, Redding Falls was wrapped in a thick, colorless fog. The kind of air that muffles every sound and makes even the streetlights seem hesitant to shine. Derek hadn't slept since the incident. He'd written the report exactly as required: loss of signal. Officers unresponsive. But every word felt like a lie. Deep down, he knew something had happened inside that asylum. Something that didn't fit on paper. The official search team returned at dawn. They found the patrol car exactly where the GPS said it was, doors open, keys still in the ignition. Inside, 2 radios, both switched to channel 3, the dispatcher's frequency. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints leading away. It was as if Ramirez and Hale had simply stepped into the fog and vanished. Derek stayed at the station long after everyone else left. Around 3 a.m., when the building was silent again, he opened the recording of the 911 call for the 5th time. He listened carefully to every second, isolating the background frequencies. That's when he noticed it, a faint pulse of interference, repeating every 11 seconds. Not static. Breathing. He leaned closer, his headphones pressed tight. Between the distorted hisses, a woman's voice whispered something almost too low to catch. He replayed it again and again until the words became clear. "You're late." He froze. The same voice as the night before. Same tremor. Same echo, as though carried from a deep concrete chamber. His throat went dry. He ran a diagnostic on the line trace. The signal source was still listed as St. Helena's Psychiatric Hospital. And somehow, it was still active. He should have shut the system down right then. But curiosity mixed with guilt, and guilt always wins. He switched the main console to manual override, grabbed a field receiver from the cabinet, and decided to drive out himself. The road to the asylum twisted through a strip of forest that hadn't seen maintenance in years. Branches leaned over the road like hands, scraping the roof of his car. When he finally saw the hospital in the distance, it stood like a black shape against the fog, enormous, rotted, with its windows covered in boards that trembled in the wind. At the gate, Derek stopped the engine. The headlights illuminated 2 muddy tire tracks, the same ones from the missing patrol car. He followed them with his flashlight until he reached the main steps. One of the double doors was cracked open, slowly moving back and forth as if breathing. Inside, the air was heavy with mold and old disinfectant. The smell of something that had once been sterile but had long since decayed. The hall was lined with broken wheelchairs and metal gurneys, their wheels squeaking slightly with every draft. His radio, hanging at his side, crackled softly. "Dispatch," a voice said. It was Ramirez. Derek froze. "Ramirez, is that you? Where are you?" No answer. Only the sound of footsteps, slow and uneven, echoing from somewhere below. He followed the sound through a corridor where the paint peeled like old skin. The signs on the walls were still legible: Ward C, Pharmacy, Morgue. The steps led him to a stairwell descending into the basement. He hesitated, then switched on his portable recorder. Redding Falls Dispatch, private log, timestamp 3:47. Possible contact from missing officers. Investigating. His voice trembled despite his attempt to sound composed. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. It was the kind of cold that made the breath feel thick, like inhaling dust. The light from his flashlight barely reached the end of the corridor. The walls were covered in black soot from the old fire. Somewhere in the dark, a droplet of water hit metal with a rhythmic ping, ping, ping. At the far end of the basement, he found an open service door leading to a narrow hall lined with records cabinets. On the floor lay one of the police flashlights. Still on. Still warm. "Ramirez?" Derek whispered. From the radio came a soft crackle. Then his own voice answered back, not live, but recorded. "Derek, is that you?" He froze. That was his tone, his inflection, even the same stutter he had when he was nervous. But he had never said those words tonight. The radio continued playing, slightly warped, like a tape left too long in the sun. "Don't go downstairs, Derek." The message repeated. The same phrase, each time quieter, slower, until the words dissolved into static and a sound like faint breathing right next to the microphone. He looked around the dark corridor, light trembling in his hand. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but he couldn't. The signal was still active. Someone, or something, was transmitting from inside these walls. He turned off the recorder, steadied his breath, and walked deeper into the hall. The static in his earpiece grew louder with each step until it almost became a constant hum. And beneath that hum, he could swear, was the same voice whispering again. "You shouldn't have come alone." The door to the basement groaned as Derek pushed it open. The hinges let out a deep, metallic cry that echoed through the empty corridors like a warning. The air was colder down there, heavy, damp, and metallic, with a faint scent of ash and burnt chemicals. His flashlight flickered against the concrete walls, revealing peeling paint, rusted pipes, and faded signs that pointed to places no one should visit anymore. Records, patient files, storage, isolation wing. He tried to steady his breathing as he moved forward, calling softly, "Ramirez? Hale?" His voice died almost immediately, absorbed by the thick silence. The beam of light caught something on the floor, a blood smear, small but recent, glistening under the dust. Derek knelt and touched it with his gloved hand. Still wet. He swallowed hard and followed the faint trail down the corridor. As he turned a corner, the hallway opened into a large room with overturned cabinets and scattered papers. On the walls hung faded patient photographs, burned around the edges. Some faces were missing, torn out or blackened. His flashlight stopped on a clipboard pinned to a cracked tile. He leaned closer and read the handwritten label. Patient number 47, Derek M. He froze. His pulse began to hammer in his throat. It couldn't be real. He had never been here before, never even known this place existed until the call. Yet there, in faded blue ink, was his full name, date of birth, the same as his. He flipped the page with shaking fingers. Under status it read, "Deceased in fire, 1972. Cause, cardiac arrest following exposure to smoke." The room seemed to spin. He staggered back, the flashlight slipping slightly in his grip. Somewhere in the corridor behind him, something moved, a soft scrape, like a shoe dragging across the floor. "Ramirez," he called again, voice cracking. No answer. Only the quiet hum of the building, as though it were breathing through its own wounds. He walked toward the sound. The corridor narrowed, the ceiling lower. The walls here were scorched black, marked with faint handprints pressed into the soot. As he passed them, he noticed one print fresher than the rest, cleaner, the outline still sharp, as if someone had just touched it. His radio hissed. A burst of static, then a faint voice. "Dispatch." It was Hale this time. Weak, distant. "Hale! Where are you?" Derek shouted. "Basement, she's here." The transmission cut. A low vibration began beneath his feet, subtle but real. The pipes rattled, and somewhere far below, a metallic bang echoed through the halls. Derek's instincts told him to leave, but his body didn't move. He followed the sound until he reached a heavy door marked morgue. The handle was cold and slick with condensation. He hesitated, then pulled. The door swung open with a slow hiss of air. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. His breath came out in white clouds. Rows of broken gurneys and rusted body drawers lined the walls. In the corner, the police flashlight he'd seen earlier lay beside an old tape recorder. He picked it up. The play button was already pressed down. From the speaker came faint breathing, steady, mechanical, followed by his own voice. "Derek, is that you?" He stumbled back, heart racing. That was the same phrase he had heard in the dispatch room the previous night. He fast-forwarded the tape. A new sound emerged, footsteps, then a deep male voice whispering, "He doesn't remember." Suddenly, every light on the recorder blinked red. The tape ejected itself, landing on the floor. From the open drawer beside him, a cold draft crawled up his arm. He turned the flashlight toward it. Inside lay an old police badge, half melted. The nameplate was still visible, Officer R. Ramirez. Derek stepped back. A shadow passed across the far wall, too solid to be a trick of light. It moved slowly, dragging along the tiles. He swung the flashlight, but there was nothing, only the echo of his own quickening breath. He turned toward the stairs, but as he did, a faint noise came through his radio again. It wasn't static this time. It was a recording of his own dispatch log, playing in a loop. Reading Falls Dispatch, timestamp 03:47, investigating. Then, layered over his voice, a second, identical, whisper. "You were never supposed to leave." Derek backed away, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The corridor behind him pulsed faintly with a reddish glow, like emergency lights flickering somewhere deep underground. He ran toward the stairwell, boots slamming against the wet concrete, the sound chasing itself through the darkness. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, his flashlight sputtered out. For one long second, he was surrounded by perfect silence. Then a single word came through the darkness, close to his ear, not from the radio this time, but from just behind him. "Welcome back." The stairwell walls were sweating. Moisture ran down the cracked concrete like veins of condensation, catching Derek's trembling light as he climbed. His breathing was shallow, erratic, every sound behind him seemed too close, too synchronized with his steps. When he finally reached the ground floor, the silence of the asylum was absolute again, vast and suffocating. He leaned against the wall, trying to process what he'd seen below, his own name on an old patient file, the melted badge, the voice whispering from the recorder. None of it made sense. He told himself it was fatigue, hallucination, stress. But the cold that clung to him wasn't in his head. It felt real, like the air itself was rejecting him. The flashlight beam swept across the hall and stopped in a room with a rusted sign that read "Observation." The door was ajar. Inside, a row of old security monitors lined the wall, coated in dust and cobwebs. Most were dead, showing nothing but static, but one screen was still flickering with faint light. Derek stepped closer. The monitor showed a familiar room, his own dispatch station back at the police department. The angle was perfect, like a security camera feed. On screen, a man sat at the console wearing his headset, staring at the blinking line of an active call. Derek's blood ran cold. It was him. He watched himself lean forward, say something into the mic, then freeze as if he'd heard something. Slowly, the on-screen version of him turned his head toward the camera. His eyes looked hollow, lifeless, and his mouth moved silently. Derek leaned into ear. The speakers crackled to life with his own voice whispering, distorted and slow. "I warned you not to answer." The room darkened. Every monitor on the wall flickered on simultaneously, one by one, until they all displayed the same image, the basement corridor he had just escaped. Two police officers stood in the frame, side by side, their faces pale and motionless. Behind them, something else moved, a dark outline, tall and formless, hovering just at the edge of the light. Derek stepped back instinctively, his pulse hammering in his ears. The figure on the screens tilted its head slowly, as though it could see him through the glass. Then the power surged, and every monitor went black at once. The hum of electricity died, leaving only the faint sound of the tape recorder still playing somewhere down the hall. He turned toward the doorway. The corridor was darker than before, the air thicker, humming faintly with static. He could hear faint whispers now, fragments of radio chatter, old emergency calls overlapping one another. Voices of dispatchers, officers, victims, all blending together in a soft, eerie chorus. Unit 12, respond. Send backup, basement level 3. Please, someone, help. He followed the sound, drawn like it was pulling him forward. The hall led to the old control center, where medical staff once monitored patients. On the desk sat another reel recorder, newer than the rest, its tape spinning slowly even though the machine wasn't plugged in. He pressed stop. The reel halted, and the air went still. Then, without touching it again, the tape began to rewind itself, violently, snapping and squealing until it stopped. Then it clicked back into play. The first thing he heard was his own voice from earlier that night. Reading Falls Dispatch, private log, timestamp 3:47. Possible contact from missing officers. Investigating. Then another voice layered over it, not quite human, deep and distorted. You keep repeating the same night. He stumbled backward, the radio at his belt hissing to life. Derek, it said, but it wasn't a plea this time. It was his own tone again, identical, calm, emotionless. Go to the records room. You left something there. He didn't want to obey, but his legs moved on instinct. The corridor leading to the records room was darker than before, the ceiling lights dead. His flashlight flickered, barely keeping up. The closer he got, the louder the static became, until it felt like it was inside his skull. He pushed open the door. Inside, the metal cabinets were shaking, rattling against the floor. Papers flew like pale birds in the dim light. On the wall opposite him, something had been written in ashen soot. Patient number 47 returned. The letters dripped slightly, as if freshly painted. Behind him, the sound of metal scraping echoed again. He turned the flashlight toward the hall, and saw movement on the screens that lined the outer wall of the control room behind him. They had turned back on. Now they showed live footage from the asylum itself. Every hallway, every room, all filmed from impossible angles. In one of them, Derek saw himself, standing exactly where he was now, staring into the monitor, flashlight shaking. He raised his hand, and on the screen, the reflection did the same. Then, in the footage, a dark figure stepped out from the edge of the frame and stood behind his on-screen self. Derek spun around, nothing. Only the empty hall, breathing faintly through the vents. He turned back toward the monitors, but now the image had changed again. The screens displayed a single frozen frame, a close-up of his face, pale and terrified, with one phrase beneath it flashing in red. Recording complete. The sun never rose over Reading Falls that morning. A thick storm front hung over the town, pressing down with gray weight. By the time the first search team reached the grounds of St. Helena's Psychiatric Hospital, the air smelled like wet ash and ozone. The road leading to the asylum was littered with police tape from the night before, fluttering weakly in the wind. The patrol found Derek's car parked by the rusted gates, engine still running, headlights aimed into the fog. The driver's door stood open, keys dangling from the ignition. The passenger seat held his field radio, a half-empty thermos of coffee, and a small voice recorder blinking red. When Officer Sanders pressed play, the tape hissed, then Derek's voice filled the cabin, calm at first, then trembling. This is Dispatch Miller, timestamp 5:12. I found them. Or at least, I think I did. They're still here. All of them. Then a pause. Faint breathing. The sound of footsteps on wet concrete. A woman's whisper bled through the static. Stay with us. The rest of the recording was silence. Inside the building, the search team found no sign of Derek. But they did find things that shouldn't have been there, footprints leading in circles through the dust, police equipment stacked neatly in a corner, and 3 name tags laid out in a perfect row on the nurse's counter: R. Ramirez, T. Hale, D. Miller. Down in the basement, where the air still carried a trace of smoke from the old fire, they found an open drawer in the morgue. Inside lay a charred tape reel labeled Dispatch Incident, 2:17 a.m. The captain ordered it bagged as evidence, but before sealing it, one of the officers noticed something etched faintly into the metal lid, a name scratched by hand. Derek. When the tape was played back at the department later that day, it began with the standard preamble, a dispatcher's greeting, the hum of the call center, distant typing. Then came the same call from the night of the incident. The woman's voice, trembling and soft. He's here, in the basement. Please hurry. But halfway through, the voice changed. It became lower, slower, more deliberate. The words repeated, warped until they formed new ones. "He's here, with me." The audio ended with the same sound heard in all the previous transmissions: breathing. Slow, close, unmistakably human. That was the last verified trace of Derek Miller. No remains were recovered. His personnel file was officially marked missing in the line of duty, though his supervisor quietly added another note in red ink: "Do not reopen." See reference, Case 911, 1972 fire. Weeks later, a new dispatcher took over Derek's night shift. Her name was Lila Torres, 28 years old, recently transferred from another district. She'd heard rumors about the incident but assumed they were exaggerated. The first few nights passed uneventfully, routine calls, small-town emergencies. Then, one night, around 2:17 a.m., the line rang. She adjusted her headset and answered, "911, what's your emergency?" For several seconds, there was only static. Then, faint and distorted, a man's voice replied. Calm, professional, almost familiar. "This is Dispatch Miller. Requesting confirmation. I've got a live signal from St. Helena's." Lila frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, could you repeat that? Did you say St. Helena's?" The line crackled. Behind the voice, she heard something faint, a rhythmic tapping, like rain dripping on metal. Then breathing. "Derek," she whispered without meaning to. The voice on the other end paused. Then, barely audible. "She's still on the line." The call ended. The station's logs confirmed an inbound connection from an unregistered number with a 1970s prefix. The timestamp was 2:17 a.m. The same as before. When Lila's supervisor tried to replay the recording from that night, the file was blank. The system showed no audio data, just 2 words entered automatically by the software. "Call not found." Months later, construction crews began demolishing the remains of St. Helena's Asylum. As they tore down the main administrative wing, workers found a sealed metal door behind a collapsed wall. Inside was a narrow service corridor that had been untouched since the fire. On the wall, written in soot, were 5 names, the same 3 officers, the woman from the first 911 call, and at the bottom, scrawled larger than the rest, "Dispatch." The foreman ordered the chamber sealed again. By noon, the demolition continued. That night, a storm rolled through Redding Falls. Lightning cut the sky open, and for a few seconds, the power in the emergency call center flickered. Every monitor rebooted at once, flashing static. Then, just before returning to normal, the system displayed a single frozen frame, Derek sitting at his console, headset on, eyes fixed on the screen, and behind him, a dark figure leaning close, its face lost in shadow. When the image vanished, the only sound in the room was a faint hiss, like breath pressed against a microphone. In the logbook, the system had saved one new entry: automatic, untraceable. Line active. Awaiting next call.